Helena. No,
Hello.
it's wonderful. So thank you for that, Sue. You want to get fired up and inspired so you can hold your own with your family later. How about you, Orit? Why are you here?
I want to have an idea of how I can facilitate something. Instead of waiting to have more courage and more answers or whatever, just see what's at hand for me and how I can pay it forward.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Orit. Gilly, how about you?
Most of the time I'm pretty up. I'm quite energized and fired up and do a lot of stuff relating to sort of passing on information about the situation we're in and what we can do. I do stuff locally. I feel I'm dancing as fast as I can. And especially after the latest IPCC, I do have moments where I just feel completely overwhelmed and probably I feel like I want to just stay in bed. I feel quite low about it. It takes me energy to sort of pull myself out of that. And I'm hoping to find a way of helping me do that.
Really exhausting, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. John?
Yeah, echo what Gilly said, actually. I'm reasonably active in sort of climate work. You know, I'm fairly well up on the science. I know, well, to an extent anybody does, I know what's going on. I have generally up to now avoided adaptation and deep adaptation for various reasons. But I think, like Gilly, since you know, half the world is now on fire, it appears, and you know, the latest IPCC report, I've sort of felt I really need to get into this space, you know, and just hear what, you know, hear it from this angle, I guess. And I'm very pleased to be here for that reason.
Great. Thank you, John. Helena?
My camera on.
There you are.
Yeah, I think for me, I've kind of been in and out of different phases of feeling it very acutely, and then also actually at times finding it quite easy to disconnect from it all, and that in itself can scare me because I realise how easy it is just to get back into normal life, and so yeah, part of it is kind of wanting to stay connected, but also in a way that doesn't just throw me into my own my own whirlwind of my thoughts and feelings. So kind of staying connected with other people, and but being able to look at what's going on at the same time.
Yeah. Thank you. And Kate, anything you want to add? I know you've been to countless of these, but anything particular today?
As always, it's always just a pleasure to connect with like-minded people and to sort of just be there for support and new perspectives on things.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So, and please use this time to kind of steer and make sure that you do get what you want. I have to say that the first chunk, you know, there is a way of looking at it that says, oh, the first part's really depressing, but I promise you, and a lot of it you probably know already, but I promise you that in the second part, it gets more practical and even uplifting and inspiring, and yeah, so please stick around. Orit, did you get a turn? Yes, did you get a turn? No, yes, you did. Yeah, thank you very much, Gilly. Oh, so let's get into it then and look at the kind of, let's just tell you first of all about who Heart is, for those of you that don't know. We're a Hertfordshire-wide community group. We've been going a couple of weeks. We've seen, yeah.
Couple of years, not weeks.
Did I say couple of weeks? Oh my goodness. Couple of years. And in fact, we started this before the COVID pandemic. So, you know, that's just kind of brought to life for us how possible it is for extreme disruption. And we accept that more is coming, unraveling, perhaps even societal collapse in our lifetimes, and indeed is already occurring in various parts of the world. We think it's really important to tell the truth. And our priority is kind of resilience, especially local community resilience and adaptation. And learning how to face our predicament from a place of courage, well-being, resilience, and wisdom. So it's certainly not giving up, far, far from it. We want people to prioritize adaptation as well as mitigation. Both are important. We want to support local communities so that they can respond to all this with kindness and love. We want to reduce suffering as much as possible. And we're also involved in informing and supporting local leaders and influencers. We spend a lot of time talking with councillors, local resilience officers, those sorts of people. We've been involved between us in the Transition Towns movement, in XR. Kate here set up a local community garden in St Albans where she lives. And a couple of us are psychologists by background, and our particular niche is offering free support for those who are struggling or suffering. We also run free workshops and retreats, and that's our website address there. So that's who we are. And so let's just take a dive into the rapidly now changing face of our predicament. I think we can all see that society is increasingly fragile, and it's not just climate change, folks, as you know. It is a series of sort of interconnected predicaments, collapse of biodiversity and ecosystems, zoonotic diseases, of course, economic fragility, increasingly divisive politics, and lots of social injustice, resource depletion. So there's a whole load of stuff hitting us all at the same time. So this is a little picture of the doomsday clock here, which you may have seen. We're very, very close to midnight. We are 75 days away from COP26 today. I think it's fair to say that the era of climate denialism is largely over. You may agree or disagree with that. Everything that people predicted, that scientists predicted, is kind of here now, and likely to get more extreme more quickly. We believe the UK government is still not acting as though our house is on fire, even though they've declared a climate emergency. And we think this is really now a threat to public health, to national security, and it's also a moral emergency because of the social injustice that I've already mentioned. But there's a different kind of denialism that we've noticed, which is that hardly anybody's telling the truth about how bad it is. We still have the UK government boasting about how it's leading the world, and it really isn't. There's even a new term called bright green lies, and we see massive greenwashing from organisations, corporations, and even NGOs, actually. The big news over the last couple of months, we've kind of broken it down into a few things. We've just had the 6th assessment, as you've seen, from the IPCC, which was subtitled Code Red for Humanity. We had the leak report in June, talking about 3 degrees maybe baked in. Also in June, we had the 3rd risk assessment from the UK's Climate Change Committee, focusing on adaptation, which concluded that the UK is nowhere near prepared in terms of climate resilience. We've had the very sad news that the rainforest, the Amazon, is now, for the first time, a carbon emitter, and signs that the AMOC, of which the Gulf Stream is a part, may be collapsing, and that's got massive implications for food, agriculture. And of course, we've all seen the news, the recent flooding, the fires, the droughts. It's here now, folks, and impacting every single part of the world. And the UK and Germany won't be an exception. Again, all of that's summarized on the website. So I think I'll go very, very quickly through these things. This is a summary of that third assessment I talked about. Adaptation action has failed to keep pace. That's the thing about the AMOC, Amazon rainforest. Yeah, so we're saying it's too late now for a mitigation only approach. People seem to be predominantly obsessed with net zero and with reducing emissions, and that's really important, but it's not enough anymore. We're locking in more vulnerability and irreversible impacts. Even with the new homes that we've been building in the UK, they're not going to be resilient to the temperatures that are coming, and they'll all face a costly retrofit, which costs 4 times as much as doing it in the first place. Yeah, so the risks and costs have worsened despite general increased awareness. Partly that's because of new evidence and some of the recent science surprising even the scientists. It's all happening much more quickly than many of them predicted, but it's also due to a lack of action about adaptation so far. It's interesting, I came across this. This is a TED talk from 2012, which is kind of interesting to look at retrospectively, saying that 2 degrees is almost certainly too high to be safe and too low to be possible. That was back in 2012. This is Sir James Bevan, the head of the Environment Agency, talking about why net zero isn't enough. You can read his report there. And although we're an island, sorry, Orit, I know you're not in the UK, but we're part of an interconnected world. And climate impacts elsewhere also affect us. And there's not enough attention being paid to that. This is a graph you may have seen looking at right back to a pretty long time ago. Something's not working, folks, in terms of all the COPs and all the summits and all the agreements. It just keeps going up and up and up. This is the tipping points. This is a really useful conversation on YouTube with Robert Hunziker, methane, of course. And again, I'll leave you to explore all of these links if you should want to. So again, I say, this is not just climate change and emissions. It impacts, it's the compound impact of all of these interconnected things from the 7 spheres here. Yeah. So instead of seeing the climate predicament as something faced by our children or grandchildren, we need to start focusing on what could happen tomorrow, next year. Perhaps we can reduce the harm, and it's really important to try. Perhaps we can extend the glide. You know, most countries are already rebooting the existing economy as fast as they can. And interestingly, you know, they're not usually considered to be wacky doomists. The MOD has more than 60 people full-time engaged with planning for severe breakdown. We've given you a link to their 2020 report there. By 2030, the world could face a perfect storm. And even banks and hedge funds, JP Morgan here, it's likely the situation will continue to deteriorate where one cannot rule out catastrophic outcomes where human life as we know it is threatened. And Deutsche Bank, modern civilization is screwed. And as Professor Jem Bendell here says, he's the kind of founder of this deep adaptation framework and community. You know, if you're rooting for humanity to make the best of a bad situation, you might want to have some people with other values, instincts, and training than the military and the bankers preparing for it. We all need to prepare for it. This is just a kind of, well, I don't know if you find it amusing. The world's billionaires are going absolutely bonkers. Demand has shot up for luxury underground bunkers. They attribute the spike to climate change and likely social unrest. So why are most people either in denial or ignorant of this, even though awareness has gone up substantially? There's a lot of reasons, psychological reasons. And also, you know, we live in this culture of deeply ingrained progress, infinite growth at all costs. And then there's the fact that, you know, many of us rely on the media to tell us what's happening, and they have a particular agenda of their own. We're not getting the truth from them. Only the most courageous scientists speak out. And also, I think big business has captured the narrative, as I said earlier, with these bright green lies. Everybody's jumped on the bandwagon now of being green, environmentally friendly. But when you delve deeper, as we have, a lot of it is greenwashing. And George Monbiot here talks about MCB, which stands for micro-consumerist bollocks, which means that everybody's kind of engaged really genuinely and sincerely in, you know, what we might call the plastic straws, the cotton buds, you know, all they're not unimportant, but it's all kind of a displacement activity. It distracts us from the systemic problems. And in some ways is a safe substitute for confronting the economic status quo. So we're saying, deep adaptation is saying, you know, collapse may well be coming, certainly extreme disruption. Millions of people are already suffering. It's worse than we've been told. We are now in danger. We must do all that we can to try and slow the problem down, but we must also now do all that we can to help each other, to support each other, especially the vulnerable. Just a quick pop quiz for you. Does anybody know, unmute yourself if you do, what these acronyms stand for? TO-TWARKY? Anyone know? Jilly? No?
No idea.
What is it?
Hang on. What if? No.
Well, that first one there is the end of the world as we know it.
Oh, okay.
WTS, HTF, when the shit hits the fan.
Oh, okay, yes.
And yo-yo, and this is one we disagree with fundamentally, that's a kind of an affirmation with, you know, by people that might describe themselves as preppers, and it stands for you're on your own. And we don't think that's true. And in the whole point of our community group is to kind of spread the word that you're not on your own. And then look, one of the things that I've been learning about over the past few years is the rise and fall of civilizations. It was a whole new area for me. We never covered it at school, really. And I came to see that, like, it wouldn't be odd if this civilization, as it is now, collapsed. It would be odd if it didn't. They all do. The two big differences this time, of course, globalization and interconnectedness, and the overshoot of planetary boundaries. So one of the things that we sometimes share with people is this table. I appreciate the writing's very small, but you can look at it in more detail when you get the slide deck. And if you imagine there are kind of 4 paradigms or come-froms or stances, you've got column 1 there, which is probably still the mainstream, business as usual. Yes, climate change is real. We've all accepted that now, but it's a long way away and it's a long time in the future. And the whole kind of paradigm is business as usual. Let's carry on doing what we've been doing. Column 2 is business as usual, but greener, or what might be called build back better capitalism. Column 3 is kind of emergency, and that would probably include people like Extinction Rebellion. And column 4 is collapse aware. Interestingly, and you may wish to comment on where you see yourself in this, and it's not right or wrong, it's interesting because whichever column you're in, that's gonna predict a whole load of things about the actions that you take, what you see as important, what you see as priorities. What is fascinating is when we share this table with MPs, councillors, political leaders, and we ask them where they are, they say often, well, officially column 2. And then we say, yeah, but really, where are you? And they often say 3 to 4. And that's what we mean about people just aren't telling the truth. There's a kind of this, let's all put a happy face on it. Let's make sure there's a happy ending. Let's not scare people. So I just wanted to finish this piece, and then we'll give you an opportunity to feed back about how that all feels. I just want to share a very short video, which was part of the scholars warning from December. And in fact, our Kate here, who's a PhD, was one of the signatories to that. Let's you just give me a thumbs up if you hear it.
As scientists and scholars from around the world,
we call on policymakers
to engage openly with the risk of disruption
and even collapse of societies.
After 5 years of failing to reduce emissions in line with the Paris Climate Accord,
we must now face the consequences.
While bold and fair efforts to cut emissions and naturally draw down carbon are essential,
researchers in many areas consider societal collapse a credible scenario this century.
Different views exist on the location, extent, time impermanence, and cause of disruptions.
But the way modern societies exploit people and nature is a common concern.
Only if policymakers begin to discuss this threat of societal collapse
might we begin to reduce its likelihood, speed, severity, harm to the most vulnerable, and to nature.
Some armed services already see collapse as an important scenario.
Surveys show many people now anticipate societal collapse.
Sadly, that is the experience of many communities in the global south.
However, it's not well reported in the media and mostly absent from civil society and politics.
Lorsque les médias couvrent le risque d'effondrement, ils citent généralement des personnes qui condamnent la discussion sur le sujet. Les spéculations mal informées, comme celles citant des campagnes de désinformation venant de l'étranger, où les répercussions sur la santé mentale et la motivation ne favorisent pas une discussion sérieuse.
that risks betraying thousands of activists whose anticipation of collapse is part of their motivation to push for change on climate, ecology, and social justice.
Some of us believe that a transition to a new society may be possible. That will involve bold action
to reduce damage to the climate, nature, and society,
including preparations for disruptions to everyday life.
We are united in regarding efforts to suppress discussion of collapse as hindering the possibility of that transition.
We have experienced how emotionally challenging it is to recognize the damage being done,
along with the growing threat to our own way of life.
We also know the great sense of fellowship that can arise. It is time to invite each other into difficult conversations,
so we can reduce our complicity in the harm and make the best of a turbulent future.
Okay. Thank you. So we're quite a small group today. So let's all stay together for this bit. I just want to ask you to share whatever you feel like sharing about how that feels to you, all of that, the last 30 minutes. Just share what you're feeling. Sue.
Totally real, but huge sort of difficulty in knowing what bit one could actually express publicly or in any kind of group without actually being regarded as nuts. It's just trying to sort of sort out, okay, I was writing, no, I didn't, I photographed the mainstream business as usual but greener, emergency and collapse aware, and thinking, if I were to actually produce that in a way to sort of say to people, which bit, where do you fit? I just wonder if that would work. I'm really trying to find tools that actually I could use and not be laughed off the stage. That's really what's going on.
Yeah, gotcha. I hear you. Yeah, thank you. Kate, feelings?
Just to respond to Sue just there, I kind of tend to find that for people who aren't on the same page, it's good to kind of say the real, very real possibility of worst case scenarios. Just do it as a statistical probability kind of thing. I can't really disagree with that. Feelings today, I'm feeling good today. Obviously there's up days and down days.
Yeah. And I think, Sue, it's kind of, there's also a judgment call here, discerning like who you share this with and when and why and how. Yeah, we've learned a lot about that. Thank you. Orit.
Well, first, I'm really happy that it's not the first time I encounter all this information. Otherwise, it would be like a heart attack. So I know it's helpful. I feel it's nice to be with people who also see it. I feel like I've been for a while on the fourth column. I think about it brought to mind the conversation I had with another mother from kindergarten, like just before the corona started. And she was saying how afraid she is for her kids, like when they will be 70, all these things are supposed to happen, like towards the end of the century. And I was just thinking in my head, that's like coming in 3-4 years or something. And like, I don't want to think that it will come in that time, but it seems to me like when we talk about adaptation and all that, like structurally, I really have no idea how can any adjustment be made. Really, like if you have to build things, it takes time. You need the money, and we just see now, like fires, things. So much money is just poured to Corona, to I don't know, flood, whatever. I don't see how it can happen anyway. So, just being realistic.
Yeah. Thank you, Jilly.
I have a mix of feelings. I'm aware of the science, and I recognise some of this information and the presentation I get it. You know, I'm going to be on the Extinction Rebellion thing on Monday and next week, and I'm painting a pink table as I speak. It's great to be with you. I really welcome the connectedness, because it's so hard. I had a family event last weekend and there were sort of distant relatives there, and the issue's so big. I like I said earlier, I feel overwhelmed, and just trying to hone it down when a subject of, say, diet comes up, and as you say, Kate, keep it to the facts. I've struggled to keep emotion out of it because I feel so strongly about it, and there's just so much that could be said. So it is finding the right person, the right time, the right place. So yes, I still feel overwhelmed, but I'm very grateful that you're here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. John.
Yeah, I think I'm trying to monitor my own feelings. I think, yeah, gosh, I feel, I mean, whenever this information comes at you, there's always a kind of heaviness, a kind of just a sense of kind of, you know, but I'm kind of used to that. I think I also feel a sense of uneasiness, a weird, you know, and I think it's to do with what some others have said, you know, how do you bring this kind of stuff into the normal space of everyday life, both with, you know, people who, you know, my family members who are not really particularly, you know, who listen to me, but are not really that into this, you know, and also with other activists. You know, it's quite a difficult conversation to have in the activist space sometimes, because you feel like you don't want to kind of put a damper on what people are doing, you know. And I think it's quite possible to have that conversation, but it's quite, you know, it's a difficult thing to introduce. Yeah, so, you know, I'm also aware that, you know, I still have a lot of denial inside myself. You know, I read a paper a couple of years ago about functional denial, you know, the fact we, you know, that in the middle of all of this, we have to get on with our lives and do things as though that, you know, as though tomorrow is going to be pretty much like today, you know. And so I'm aware of that, you know, and sometimes that's an operation quite a lot in me, you know. I just don't want to know, you know, I just want to get it. So I'm sort of aware of all those things, you know.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's having these difficult conversations that seems to me where I want to sort of try and inhabit a bit, you know. How can, you know, have these conversations in these different spaces with myself as well as with other people, I guess, you know. So I think that's me, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for all that. Helena.
Well, like Orit, I'm glad it's not the first time coming across all of that. But I think it's like layers each time. It's still difficult, and I still feel quite a lot of, I get feeling of grief and heaviness in my chest. And it's quite, there's a part of me that doesn't particularly want to completely connect with it. As a kind of, I feel a little bit like I'm in two realities. One is kind of like just everyday life and nothing's really changed, and people around me aren't having these conversations and don't really connect with it when I speak about it. And that feels, in some ways, it's easier to kind of go along with that. And there are times where I feel a bit of resistance to sort of meeting it again, because it does evoke strong emotions in me. So yeah, I'm feeling a bit of kind of uneasiness of not really having my foot in any one camp. I'm just kind of living in the world with a sense of knowing what's happening, feeling uneasy about it, and not quite knowing. I was part of XR, but I just didn't I didn't feel like I was quite in the right place. I still do bits for XR and kind of linked in with people in Bristol there, but yeah, so that's kind of where I'm at, I guess. Just feeling and not knowing, and also related to what John said, there's also some denial, I think, that still plays out, which sometimes just feels helpful, just to not connect with it, but
and psychologically healthy, you know, in a way.
Yes.
And certainly we all need, I think, times, moments where we just live in the present and reconnect with everything that we love most. Now, I think that's wise to do.
Yeah, I've tried to remember that, the whole thing about you know, rather than thinking about how bad things will be, it's just feeling really gratitude for how everything as it is at the moment, and just really holding that as my focus. That kind of helps, I think.
Yeah. And there's still the, you know, I often say, it feels really true that everything has made my life meaningful and continues to is still here. Still here.
Yeah.
But it tends not to be material things, you know, it's love, relationships, connection, gratitude, peace even, and that connection with people and non-humans and nature. That's all still here, and actually will still be here even in worst case scenarios. So yeah.
Can we add humor to that?
Yes, please. By all means.
Helps.
By all means. And I think it is a kind of a journey. That sounds like a cliche, but I really think it is. I mean, certainly for me, it's been a journey of, you know, woo, 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 and several kind of dark nights of the soul, loads of grief, the most profound grief I've ever experienced. And then I kind of come home to myself and feel nudged about what to do next and how to be next. And I think it's really important to emphasize that, because nobody knows with any certainty exactly what's going to happen. There isn't a map. In many ways, this whole conversation is an invitation into maplessness. But it can be tremendously profound to do that, because so many of the things that, you know, were very important to me, I thought, aren't anymore. There's a kind of a, there's a kind of a dropping away of all of those stories.
Absolutely.
Which feels very kind of growthful. And there's also, because it's mapless, there isn't one right path, and we're big believers in doing whatever makes sense to you. And that may or may not have anything to do with climate change. Yeah.
Like listening to your inner compass instead of
yes, absolutely, absolutely. And just before we take a quick break, I just wanted to read you I'm just coming back with a lovely little piece from Martha Postlethwaite that I find helpful. And I'll send this to you as well afterwards. Do not try to save the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is your life falls into your own cupped hands and you recognize and greet it. Only then will you know how to give yourself to this world so worthy of rescue. I love that. And I think the key line is create a clearing in the dense forest of your life. You know, we live in this kind of busy epidemic as well as the other epidemic. And so it can be really difficult to hear that inner compass, that inner wisdom, because there's just so much going on all at the same time. And I think when we are quieter in our mind, we do get these nudges. And as I say, that could be super gluing yourself to the Exxon building. It could be engaging with, you know, local political leaders. It could be raising resilient children.
Mm.
Yeah, it can be any one of a gazillion things. So you can kind of free yourself from this belief that I must do X, Y, and Z. And often it's less about doing and more about being, who you be. And how can you, as we say in deep adaptation, respond lovingly to the predicaments that we find ourselves in, rather than responding with fear or anger. And but any emotions that you feel are kind of perfectly valid and fine and human, but also transient. Yeah. So creating a clearing in the dense forest of your life. And in many ways, this whole webinar could be subtitled, "What's most important now?" Not what was most important 10 years ago or 30 years ago or 3 weeks ago. What's most important now? And I think that can kind of really bring a focus and a clarity to whatever we decide to do. Does anybody want to just say anything before we have a quick break for a cuppa? Please don't go anywhere, but feel free to, in a moment, turn your cameras off and take a little break. Anybody want to say anything? Share anything?
Yes.
Yes, Gillian.
In COVID, I got to an absolute pitch about climate, desperate to do something useful. And I thought, what can I do? And I grow vegetables. So I've put a veg patch in my front garden for my neighbours. And now I promote and help people to grow vegetables in their own front garden. And I feel that I know what I'm doing. I can do that. I can contribute. It was about really contributing in a manageable way. And I really feel, yes, I can do that. I can hold that. There's lots of other things I really can't hold and can't do. So that has made me feel much, much better. I still struggle, but actually it's really helping me to do that. And it creates so much community engagement as well.
Yes.
And I absolutely get that whole thing about building from the bottom. Communities, we've got to come together. We've got to put the energy in. We've got to look after each other. And that's part of what I'm trying to do. And I feel much better for doing that.
Beautiful. Yeah, I can so relate to that. It's kind of, it feels meaningful. It's fun. It's something about connecting with nature. And as you say, being, giving it away as well feels really.
And talking to people. And it can lead into all sorts of climate and adaptation sort of conversations.
Yeah.
And I feel so much better.
Thank you. Okay, well, let's take a break. We're at 11:48 now. It'd be good to come back. How do you feel about 7 minutes? Is that long enough to put the kettle on if you want? So if we could come back at 11:55, and then we'll go into the second section, which is all about, okay, what do we really mean by adaptation? What can we do? What can make a difference? And what's most important now in the context of your own life? So feel free to turn your sound off and your cameras off, and I'll see you in about 7 minutes. Thank you so much. Hello, welcome back. How are you doing there, Sue?
Coming back, hang on.
How are you doing?
Okay, my mouth full actually, so
Oh, was that an apple I saw there?
Yep.
Great.
An apple and a bit of cheese. So I was just going to have some lunch now because I'm going to be shooting out at 1 o'clock. So yeah. Yes, it was a good little break. Thank you.
I'll just wait for John and Orit.
I forgot to turn on the camera.
There he is. Welcome back. Okay. Good. So here we go then with the case for adaptation and deep adaptation. A little metaphor that we often share is this one. If you imagine a car racing towards a brick wall too fast to stop, the driver has two primary tools: the brakes, which will slow the car down, and the airbags, which may cushion the passengers when they crash. So you can think of mitigation like the brakes. Adaptation is the airbags. It might protect and cushion people and nature somewhat as climate change progresses. And, you know, we need both, as we've said. Adaptation is starting to happen, but too slowly, we believe, and mostly shallow. And we'll talk a bit about what that means later on. And of course, hardly anyone is factoring in the social justice aspects of this. So as ever, it'll be those with the most access to resources who are able to adapt the most. This is Baroness Brown from the UK Climate Change Committee Adaptation, talking about a race for resilience, as well as the race for net zero. Talked about that. Yeah, this is from Rob Hopkins, who was one of the co-founders of the transition movement. If we wait for the government, it'll be too late. If we act as individuals, it will be too little. If we act as communities, it might just be enough. And I quite like this. Grandma survived the Great Depression because her supply chain was local and she knew how to do stuff. So let's talk about the different kinds of adaptation. We've put this into 3 columns here. We've got shallow, and this is mostly what people in the UK, you know, officially are talking about. When you look at things like local climate action plans, resilience plans, it's all about actions that manage the predictable risks, but within the business as usual paradigm, right? So the assumptions are that society will continue largely as it is now. So you've got things like buildings, homes, very important, flood protection. And as Rex Tillerson here, ex-CEO of ExxonMobil, former US Secretary of State, this quote from him, "It's an engineering problem and has engineering solutions," which we disagree with. It's much more than that. So most of what's talked about is shallow adaptation. Then you've got deep adaptation, which we'll spend the rest of the time on largely. And that's an acceptance that business as usual cannot be sustained. And the assumptions are that, you know, we're looking at severe disruption. And this framework called the 4R's, which I'll talk about in a moment, we'll get a chance to discuss. So it's about addressing the predicament as a whole, that it's interconnected with everything to do with our experience here as humans, including those very deeply rooted stories of infinite progress, growth, and human domination over nature, that somehow the planet is just here as a resource for us. And there's also something more recently called transformative adaptation, put forward by Professor Rupert Reed, some of you may know from his XR days. And this is focusing on transforming society, whether or not collapse happens, just because it's a good idea. So it's about working with nature. For example, rather than using more cement and concrete on building ever higher sea walls, this is about rewilding, restoring wetlands, that sort of thing. Oh, e-wilding even. Permaculture, local food production. Similar in many ways to the transition town movement, but with more of a political and macro perspective. And it also encourages taking things into our own hands where appropriate. Citizens' assemblies, non-violent direct action, and even guerrilla food gardening. So, you know, digging up the outside of the town hall and planting vegetables in there. So when you hear adaptation talked about in the public domain, it's really usually this shallow column. You may have come across Kate Rayworth and her donut economics, which is an attempt, you know, I really like it. It's an attempt to suggest a completely different economic system. You can go and look at that. It's about putting human welfare and well-being at the center and making sure we don't go over boundaries. And there are some really good examples of that happening in Amsterdam and various other places around the world. It's also some nice ideas coming out here of things like 20-minute neighborhoods, where everything that we need is within a 20-minute walk or cycle ride. And we've given you a link there to various other resources to find out more about that. And it makes a lot of sense from all sorts of angles. So the case for deep adaptation then is really about maybe it's time to accept, in order that we can do our best to reduce harm, extend the glide, let's save what we can and find meaning and joy in that process. And it's about enabling and embodying loving responses. But you know, what I've seen is that it's extremely challenging to do that acceptance, even to contemplate it. If you're still holding out for the, we can turn this around, it's all going to be fine, kind of outcome. So we wanted to just explore in this hour what deep adaptation can offer us. And as I say, mostly this chance to ask ourselves these profound questions under the 4R framework. So what is that then? Well, 4R's are these. So resilience. What is it that we most value? What's most important? How can we keep that? How can we build and sustain our own resilience, both inner and outer? Because there's very much a psychological and emotional element to this, as well as a practical outer element. Bless you.
Sorry.
Relinquishment. What can we give up in order not to make matters worse? Restoration. What can we bring back that's been lost? And then reconciliation and reconnection. How can we live now? What can we do to make peace with all of this? How can we support others? So there's the questions. Kate, I wonder if you'd be so good as to just paste those into the chat, if that's possible. And oh, you might want to take a screenshot of those questions, because we're going to in a moment go into breakout rooms and you won't have access to these slides. And sometimes on workshops and retreats, I allow, you know, people kind of are invited to look at these 4Rs, both from the individual family dimension, the collective dimension, the community dimension, even the global dimension, if you've got that kind of mind. But for today, we're just going to look at it in the context of your life and your loved ones. So I'm going to give you some examples now under each of the 4 R's, but I really want to emphasize that what's important here is not the bullet points that I'm going to share with you. What's important here are the questions, so that you get a chance to really reflect on those for yourself. And we're going to do that in 2 smaller breakout rooms. So let's start with resilience and outer resilience. And again, there's a whole load of ideas there. You may well think of others. Probably not many surprises there. Just have a quick skim read. And I'm going to pause now and give you a chance to ask any questions about any of those. These are all things that have been suggested by other participants as useful to think about in the context of outer resilience. So again, just feel free to unmute yourself and come in if you have any questions or comments or observations about those. Okay, so let's move on to resilience inner. And there's a whole load of resources on our website, on the Heart Community Group website, and also on the Deep Adaptation Forum website. And I also facilitate free 4-day retreats called The Edge, which again, you can find out more about, which is a way of really kind of strengthening your own resilience, courage, and clarity in the face of all of this, and kind of helping people to answer the question, what's mine to do? What's mine to do? So in a way, The Edge is like a kind of 4-day journey into creating a clearing in the dense forest of your life. Okay, so moving on. Relinquishment, what could we give up? Again, perhaps not a surprising list. I'm sure you've all considered many of these. But some of them are perhaps less obvious. Talked earlier about relinquishing our stories about identity, who we are, what success looks like, what a good life looks like. Also judgment, maybe we need to relinquish judgment and othering. It's a work in progress for me.
What does othering mean?
It means people that you don't see as in your tribe or maybe having different opinions. We kind of other them when we make them separate and less than and inferior. It's judgment, really.
Other people ought to do these things.
Yes, yes. Or how can they be so stupid?
Mm. I get a lot from my stepson about, well, for example, he was having a go about Greenpeace. He was saying they load it all onto individuals, but actually it's others, i.e. big companies and corporations who ought to be doing this. And I hadn't really got an answer for him. I think, yes, but we also have to. So I was a bit sort of nonplussed.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I know what you mean. And yes, it's true, like this, it doesn't let us off the hook as individuals, but it's kind of, it is a bit, it's back to George Monbiot and his micro-consumerist bollocks in a way, because it is true that, what is it, 71% of emissions come from 100 companies. But of course, we're the ones that buy their stuff. The other thing to give up, which again is a journey, is to give up the guilt, give up ego, give up perfectionism. Because again, especially the guilt doesn't really serve anybody or anything.
Suffering.
Suffering.
I'm very good with that.
Yeah. Okay. So again, I just share these with you so you get the gist of them. But the most important thing is, what do you think? Restoration. Seeds, food seeds, as well as seeds of knowledge. I know a couple of people who made it their life's work at the moment now to do what they call assisted migration, which is moving trees and plants further north.
Really? Oh.
Yeah. And finally, reconciliation and reconnection. Yeah, most of these are in the kind of psychological, emotional, spiritual domain. Very good. So in a moment, I'm going to put you into a breakout room. You'll just be with 3 or 4 other people, or 2 other people, or 3 other people. And as I said, I want you to focus on the questions under each of the 4 R's. What feels most important to you now? And you can include, if you like, you know, what's already happening, because I know, you know, by virtue of coming on this call, there are things you've already been doing. So what have you found helpful in terms of that 4R framework already? Is there already relinquishment happening, restoration happening, resilience happening? And that may well be really helpful for other people to hear. Great. Okay, so when you find yourself in your breakout room, all you have to do is click on join when you get a message in a minute, and just share, just kind of, Kate will be in one group, I'll be in the other one. And just take it in turns to share. Like, well, actually, you can just make it a very informal conversation about what's most important now for you. And let's do that for about 15 minutes or so. Okay, here we go. Hello, welcome back. Well, I hope you had a chance to explore and reflect. Thank you. Is there anybody who wants to share anything that kind of emerged from that small group discussion that seemed important, just to kind of catch people up in the other group? Yeah, all right.
It's not the content of what we spoke about, but just not being alone and connecting to other people, and just even identifying with other people or getting their ideas and just being together. It's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's very nourishing. Thank you. Anybody else?
I think I just add to that and just sort of say, it's lovely not to feel so odd. Yeah.
Yeah, not to feel bonkers.
We also discussed kind of a bit of sort of the benefits of a bit of personal prepping of, you know, maybe getting prepared for floods or things like that, and food security, and then, you know, bringing it up that, you know, it needs to be done at a community scale or you're just going to get robbed. And just going on from there, really, just having that sort of a bit for you to keep yourself feeling calm and a little bit in control, but then doing what else you can further up the scale.
Yeah. Yeah. Great stuff. Thank you. Okay, we're on the home stretch now. So back to the slide deck.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, please.
Because actually, well, we only have a couple of hours of course, just like 10 minutes of discussion. Like, this is not very long. Like, if you want, like, or I don't know, you do it also for 4 days. So I guess anything can be from 10 minutes to 1 year. I'm not sure.
Absolutely.
So I answered myself. Okay.
Absolutely, yeah, and we, because we get such a group, you know, we get people on this webinar kind of from all sorts of different walks of life. So it's, yeah, it's a tiptoe in, but we also offer, we have other events which we call reconnection events for people that have already been through this, which is all about just taking the nourishment from that reconnection and kind of bringing each other up to date and keeping that connection going. And then additionally, we offer what are called resilience workshops, which are much more focused on supporting and deepening that resilience so that you can do whatever it is you're nudged to do from a place of clarity and well-being rather than freaking out.
It's like the missing piece also that helps to come to the
yeah.
Like, if you don't have this clearing or this more quietness, you can't do anything.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. As I often say, it's quite difficult to hear the gentle flute of that wisdom when you've got a brass band playing in your head at the same time. So have a look on our website. There's a whole upcoming events page which lists all the dates for those, and you'd be very, very warmly welcome to any of them if you want to come.
That'd be really good. Yes, I've got it down. Yeah.
So as we sort of start coming to an end here, just wanted to mention the book, which is kind of came out month, 6 weeks ago, called Deep Adaptation, which is kind of edited by Jem Bendell and Rupert Reed. Very worth reading. And as I said, what's happened for me is after a period of profound grief, I did find something unexpected on the other side of that, like this deeper wellspring of love, compassion, peace, courage, resilience, even joy. And, you know, just thinking about Gilly, you were talking about your vegetables, and the first thing this morning I was out there and so grateful to have a garden. But, you know, I can only describe my human experience this morning at the crack of dawn as joy, you know, getting the dirt under your fingernails. And there's massive growth in that. And I love this Wendell Berry quote, "I am joyful, though I have considered all the facts." I really like that. It still goes in, you know, it still goes in waves. You know, there are days. I had a couple of days a few weeks ago where I was just sobbing, but I know now that they pass. They pass, and it's all transient. And most of the time, I feel very resilient, strong, courageous, on purpose, and I'm very grateful for that. So if you're asking yourself, what can I do? First, wake up. And I think everybody on this call has. It's bloody hard, massively uncomfortable, challenging. And I think, as many of you said earlier, one of the things I find hardest is this living in two worlds simultaneously.
That's a really good word to use. I hadn't thought about it. Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah.
And choosing, you know, choosing to be clear enough and wise enough about and compassionate enough as well, because there are some people that I just choose not to have this conversation with, because that's the compassionate thing to do. You know, an obvious example is my aging father, his 90s or something, but there are other people as well, much younger people. And there's a big thing for me as well about the come from in that moment. And I've noticed so fundamentally that if I'm coming from love and compassion, it works much better, whatever the conversation is. Whereas if I'm coming from freak out, urgency, judgment, you should, doesn't work. In fact, it tends to be a kind of own goal. So you can ask yourself and your family and those you consider ready for it, you can ask them the 4R questions. I would say stop numbing and distracting yourself, at least some of the time. As they call it in XR, give up the hopium of the bamboo toothbrush. Listen to your own nudges. You have as much wisdom as anybody else. And talk about it, you know, where you consider that to be appropriate. And you may find you're surprised at the number of people. There's been some surveys done recently across Europe, and suggesting that the people thinking about this is much, you know, it's much a higher percentage than I would have guessed. Ask for support. Ask for support from us. You can always pick up the phone. You can always schedule a Zoom call. If you're local, we can always meet up and offer support as well to others. So in a moment, I'm going to be asking each of you to just share what you're taking away. And anything, if it's obvious now, and it may not be, what else would you like? What else do you need? What support would you like from us? And we'd love to stay connected, and we'll, if with your permission, we'll continue to stay in touch with you and let you know about upcoming things that are happening. We may even finish a little bit early, depending on how vocal you are in this bit. But I'm really, really grateful to all of you for coming. It's a brave thing to do. So I'll stop at that point. And yeah, let's just go round. Orit, what are you taking away? And anything else that you want to share?
Yeah, first it was nice. I feel much more prepared to just maybe, I don't know, copy your PowerPoint presentation and just kind of try and do it online or here with people. And mine, it just strengthens my nudge of just focusing on the community here. School, like for me, it's always about, oh, but I'm not sure I'll be able to do it in German, whatever, but it's just like, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yep.
Great. Thank you so much. Helena.
Yeah, I've got lots of little things that I've made notes of. So sort of, I feel like I've planted lots of seeds that I will go back over, and in terms of just practical things, but also, yeah, maybe thinking about other ways of communicating with other people as well. So yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Sue.
One question. Heart starts with the word Hertfordshire.
Yes.
Now I'm about to go off to Cornwall, where my niece has bought this terribly run down bit of land and she's wanting to rewild it and so on with her husband. Is there anything to stop her tuning into this?
No, nothing at all. No, at the moment, until we're overrun with Hertfordshire people, which isn't happening at the moment, we're kind of making them open to everybody.
Unless you find something that's locally run, but I mean,
yeah,
I'll find that out. But
yeah, but no, by all means, do invite her to get engaged.
She could probably find, you know, some nourishment, which I think she and her husband probably would benefit from. That was one of my thoughts. Yes, I love the give up the hopium of the bamboo toothbrush. I think you've actually, I don't know, I just sort of feel a bit more resilient, a bit more, I don't know, in my own space, feeling I'm okay. And I've found a community of people who are thinking in the same way that Julie and I have talked about, and, you know, trying to build locally. It also made me sort of reflect a bit about our Green Festival, how much of the dark green we're really able to find representatives of. I think we've got lots of light green, but anyway.
Yes, yes. You can see now why I turned down the invitation to do a half-hour thing.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you, Sue and Ginny, for everything that you do in Letchworth.
Well, you're very, very welcome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. John.
Yeah, gosh, I'm not sure what I'm taking away. I feel very, I'm very glad I'm here, and I feel it's kind of like this is a space that I really need to inhabit. I mean, in a way, I feel like I was thinking before this that I'm kind of living in two realities at the moment. One is the dark green one, and I'm still a little bit in a bright green one insofar as I spend too much time probably online on social media, and there are people who are very much into the whole net zero thing, who are very sensible people and people I like to support and get behind. And so there's a part of me that kind of wants to still stay in that space to a small extent, while recognizing that, you know, it's, you know, it's a fantasy in some respects, and that we really, you know, we need to start talking about this, you know, as well. And, you know, my big question is, you know, as I think I said earlier, how do you talk about this in the same spaces as activists and people who are, you know, quite rightly full on working, you know, to mitigate climate change? And, you know, I guess to some degree that's to do with how do I integrate these parts of myself, you know. But I'm really glad to have been here. This is a conversation I feel I've wanted to be having for a long time and haven't really kind of, you know, found a space to do it fully, you know. So it's really important for me to have been here, and but I can't quite articulate what I'm taking away. It's a lot of it's in the feelings area, which I'm not very good at describing anyway.
Oh, you're pretty good. You're pretty good.
Well, I'm better than I used to.
You're a bloke, you know.
Thank you for that. Yeah, so you know, that's my sort of confused response to you, really, you know. But thank you for all, you know, it's I think the other thing I would say is one of the reasons I came here is because what, you know, when I saw your group and I saw your website, it felt very sane and real, you know, and very, you know, it just felt like, yeah, I want to engage with this. This feels approachable, it feels real, it feels, you know, so part of it is, you know, that I really like what you're putting out there, really, you know.
Thank you.
I'm very glad to have got involved.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And that, you know, you're so welcome, and all the, you know, I would say this to all of you, all the different parts of you are welcome as well, you know, not just the ones that are in column 4, the parts of you that are in column 4, the other parts as well.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Thank you, John. Gilly.
Yes, I agree with a lot of what other people have said. I really value what you've done here today, and I really want to promote what you do because I think it's incredibly useful, and it's certainly helped me have a much greater clarity about what is meant, because I haven't really examined adaptation or de-adaptation before, and I think it's time I did. It's been a missing part of my jigsaw.
Brilliant.
So yeah, clarity and the 4R sort of question areas give me that clarity as well.
Yeah.
So I want to tell people about what you do.
Great, thank you.
And I love what you do. You speak my language. I feel you are my tribe.
Welcome. Fantastic. Kate, anything you want to say in closing? I am always just so thankful to connect to more like-minded people and to feel this sort of like we're not alone when we are sane, and that, you know, this message will spread and we all can be a little bit more prepared and we can all soften the blow, reduce some harm. That's all I'm caring about, really. Fantastic. Thank you. Well, you've got a quarter of an hour back. We'll close now, and as I say, we'll be in touch again with further invitations. Do spread the word. Yes, Kate. Sorry, just to say, I've also put in the chat just now we've got a Facebook page and a private Facebook group. So this link, the final one, is our private Facebook group that you're very welcome to join and engage with. Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Kate. Yes, Helena.
Somebody showed me a website the other day called Job 1 for Humanity. I'm not sure if anyone's come across that, but it kind of covers a lot of this stuff. It's really interesting. So it might. What's it called? Called Job 1 for Humanity.
Ah, yes, I have seen that.
It's quite, I mean, it's quite intense, but it's it talks a lot about adaptation and yeah. Great, thank you. Great. I'll push that round in the follow-up stuff as well. So you'll get the slide deck, the Martha Postlethwaite quote, also a recent piece from one of my friends in deep adaptation, Nando, who talks about the impossible conversation, which I certainly found very useful, and you may well do as well. And look out for those further events that are coming up. And do spread the word. Anybody in your kind of circle that you think might be interested, let them know. Yes, John.
Yeah, sorry, can I just add one more thing? I just realized that what I'm taking away, I'm currently living, my wife is clergy, we're living in a church house. And so at some point in the next, probably in about 3 years, I'm going to have to move. And I've been sort of thinking where do I, and I've suddenly, this has really brought home to me that that wherever I end up living, the community aspect is going to be really important, you know. So, you know, and for some reason I just hadn't incorporated that into my thinking, really. So just thinking, well, I want to move somewhere where there is a local community who is at least starting to get switched on to this kind of stuff. Very, very helpful. Thank you.
Come to Letchworth.
Yes, we're quite high above sea level. 75 meters above sea level.
We can still be flooded, Gilly. We can still be flooded.
And you're one of the ultimate 20-minute neighbourhoods being a garden city.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Very good. All right. Thank you so much for coming, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Thank you both so very much. And thank you everybody else for your authenticity. I love it.
Absolutely right.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you again.
Bye.
Good crowd. All right.
Yeah. Lovely people.
It's burgeoning. It's good.
Yeah. It was interesting, that one. It kind of section 1 seems to be getting shorter and shorter, which I think is probably good, actually. Well, depending on who comes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where are you going on holiday?
Going up to see family for a few days in Lancashire, and then on Tuesday, and then going to the Peak District in a lodge park. But this weekend we are doing like a glamping night as well somewhere else. I don't know if have you heard of Celtic Harmony Camp? It's near Hertford.
Yes, I have. I don't know where from.
Yeah, so they've got round houses and they do all the sort of crap.
Ah, right.
But we did it with the kids years ago. It's part of my Operation Roundhouse. You know what I'm like.
Yeah.
Some of those.
Yeah. It's just reminding me, actually, I had a phenomenal conversation the other day with. Do you remember seeing him on DA? We tried to get in touch with him a couple of times. He's on the map, Darren Messenger.
Yes.
Have you spoken to him at all?
No.
He's amazing. He's amazing. I mean, not for this group, but he runs kind of eco camps and 5 rhythms dancing things and ritual things, and he runs men's groups, and he's like one of the wisest people I've met recently. Just phenomenal.
How did you meet him? Did you say online?
Well, he's in DA, and a couple of times, when I've tried to reach out on the map for people in Hertfordshire, I've kind of tried to message him, but it didn't really work. But yeah, he knows Stephen Marcus,
right?
And in fact, Stephen Marcus got in touch with him and said, you two should talk, and. It was just one of those incredibly inspiring, like, what a great guy. As I say, not for Heart Community Group, but just such a great guy, and so spiritually grounded, and doing amazing stuff. And he wants to keep in touch. He was kind of very. He doesn't want to talk to councils or politicians, but he was kind of saying, with that thing about different people doing different things is what's called for. And so yeah, just wanted to tell you about that.
No, he contacted us when we first were advertising it and couldn't make it, and then I emailed again saying, do you want to come to the next one? Never got back to us.
No. He seems to be very, very busy with loads and loads of different projects, but Stephen Marcus went to one of his camps in the woods, like they live in the woods and they cook together and eat together and that sort of thing.
Right. Sounds good. I like that kind of thing.
Yeah. Fabulous. All righty. Well, have a lovely time.
Thank you. Try the family.
No, don't try. As Yoda says, there is no try. There is only do or don't do.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. A wise one.
Have a really good time, and I'm back out in the garden now, and cooking. I'm getting very passionate about making curries again at the moment.
Oh, nice! It's that time of year. Rather than a salad, something a bit more warming.
Yeah, Yeah.
The breakout room was talking about bottling, doing bottling stuff.
Yes, I'd love to get into that.
Canning.
Canning, yes, it's very American.
You still need the lids with the sealy thing though. You still, I don't know if the Kilner ones with the rubber work or not, or for proper.
Yeah.
I've got some.
Well, I suppose they did for centuries before we had the.
Yeah, they must have done something.
Yeah. Anyway.
Anyway.
Thank you, my darling.
Okay. I'm just trying to think. I feel like there's something else I wanted to say, but we're doing it all by email, so it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll try and come to that first meeting.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah,
if we're just all in and it's raining and we put a movie on, I could probably do it. If I might not.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Take care.
You too.
Lots of love.
Thanks.
Bye. Bye. Bye.